Hello and welcome to the 34th Radical Poetry Reading. I'm Malva Kajali, Special Projects Associate here at The Rail, and today I have the pleasure of welcoming writer, organizer, and educator Mahogany L. Browne, who joined us this month as guest curator for our critics page in the April issue, and who joins us here today with a fantastic lineup of Camryn Bruno, Adam Faulkner, Cathy Linh, Tongo Eisen-Martin, Susie Q Smith, and Caroline Rothstein. And we've started out all of our events here with two important acknowledgements. The first is that here in New York, we're on Lenapehoking, the unceded land and waters of the Wappinger, Canarsie, Munsee, and Lenni Lenape people of the Delaware Nation and the Shinnecock Indian Nation. If you'd like, take a moment to share the land you're tuning in from in the chat and some observations on what it's like around you. The second is an acknowledgement that Black Lives Matter. In the wake of the guilty verdict in the Derek Chauvin murder trial just last week, it's hard not to think today about the devastating violence and reach of systemic racism, especially when over 181 Black folks have lost their lives at the hands of police across the country in just the span of time since George Floyd's murder last May. This includes, of course, 16-year-old Ma'Khia Bryant, who was shot several times and killed by Columbus Police Department after she called them herself, seeking protection. It's devastating to grasp the whole picture of the violence and collective trauma of systemic racism across not just individuals, but families, communities, and generations. And also to see how little has changed. Today, before we open up for our program, we'd like to invite you to join us for a brief moment of silence to remember Ma'Khia Bryant. Thank you so much. And now it's my honor to welcome our curator, the wonderful Mahogany Browne, who is a writer, organizer, educator, and so much else here with us today. She's received fellowships from Agnes Gund, Air Serenbe, Cave Canem Poets House, the Mellon Research, and Rauschenberg. She's the author of recent works, Chlorine Sky, Woke, A Young Poet's Call to Justice, Woke Baby, and Black Girl Magic. And as the founder of the diverse literary initiative Woke Baby Book Fair, Browne is excited to release her newest poetry collection, which is coming out fall of this year with Haymarket Books, one of my favorite presses, which will be responding to the impact of mass incarceration on women and children. It will be called I Remember Death by its proximity to what I love. Mahogany, so happy to have you here, and take it away.
Thank you so much, Malika. My name is Mahogany L. Browne, and I'm excited to bring to the stage, the virtual stage, some of the best writers of our time. These are a small crew of the folks who were a part of the guest critic poetry section that I was able to curate. And I'm really excited for you to see all that they have to share within a lunchtime, of course. You will hear from the poets in this order: Susie Q Smith, Caroline Rosstein, Tongo Eisen-Martin, and then we'll have a quick conversation before jumping into our second half with Camryn Bruno, Cathy Linh, and Dr. Adam Faulkner. All right, so wherever you are, go ahead and hold on to your seats. Make sure you populate that chat window and talk to the poets so that they know that you are hearing them, that you are with them. The things that we are talking about obviously are responding to the times. My piece for the guest critic space is called Proximity of Violence and Our Black Women Bodies, which is really a meditation on COVID-19. What does it mean to be a Black woman in America? And of course, how we are surviving together, how our humanity survives, and how we take care of ourselves. The poets, they'll be reading any and everything. It'll be amazing. So first up, without further ado, Susie Q Smith is an award-winning artist, activist, and educator who lives in Denver, Colorado. Her collection of poems, A Gospel of Bones, is available from Alternating Current Press, and her second collection, Poems for the End of the World, will be available from Finishing Line Press in June 2021. After Susie will be Caroline Rosstein, who is an internationally touring and acclaimed writer, poet, and performer. She's been performing spoken word poetry, public speaking, facilitating workshops, and teaching at colleges, schools, performance venues, summer camps, and community organizations for over a decade, right? And finally, closing out the first round will be Tongo Eisen-Martin, who is also an educator and organizer whose work centers on issues of mass incarceration, extrajudicial killings of Black people, and human rights. He has taught at detention centers around the country and at the Institute for Research in African American Studies at Columbia University. He is currently the 8th Poet Laureate of San Francisco. Please welcome to the stage our poets.
Thank you for that beautiful introduction, Mahogany. Thank you so much for having me here. My name is Susie Q Smith. I'm joining you from the occupied territory of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute Nations, also known as Denver, Colorado. And I'm an educator. I'm also in a classroom full of my 6th grade students. Everybody say, what up, Brooklyn Rail? They are on a field trip, and I'm going to read to you a piece. So Tony Cade Bombara said, the role of an artist is to make the revolution irresistible. And this piece that I'm going to share today is in that vein. So this is a visionary poem considering the liberated future that's possible. And so it is called We Sang Ourselves Free. We didn't always know we would win, just that we would do whatever we had to in order to get free. We used to sing softly to each other, to ourselves, hum low under our breath to remember our voices in places we were unwelcome. We danced in secret. We laughed silently across rooms, taking our quiet joys and tucking them into our pockets like perfumed handkerchiefs we could smell later when we needed to remember. One day, we saw the first rose bloom in years when we sang the low notes we'd been singing since before time had a name. We got louder. More people joined in the song, and the grasses awoke from their slumber. The wolves came and sat at our feet, weeping. The rains came down and the trees remembered us. We began again and we knew God was listening, and the rains came the way they come, slow and sweet at first, washing the old ash and dust to the rivers. Then again, there were rivers where we washed our hands and feet, where we washed each other's hair, where we sang our old songs and the earth heard, answering in heather and pine. And she answered in the day's harvest, yellows spiraling into violets, sweets wrapping themselves in spicy oranges, and fuchsias tumbling over each other to embrace the sour and soft fruit of each other. We ate and grew fat again. We all fell madly in love and raised perfect children, the sort of perfect that brought us into each day laughing. We grinned, rich as noonday, each of us carrying the songs and teaching them to the children, how to stretch a note all the way into fingertips until the trees begin to sway. You feel that? We said to each other, our hairs standing to answer the electric air. Yes, we all answered, yes. And I'll share one piece, the one that is in the critics issue. And this is a contrapuntal called On Loyalty. If we can agree on the shape of our home, its general location and look, how we will treat each other within it, then we must be family. Let's decide together how we say hello, how we take our leave. Let us be loyal to courageous love, for and with grace. Do bars on the windows make you feel more or less safe? Please do not be bothered by singing, shadowed lines scattering the floor, open and listening to an imperfect tide. Beloved, the color of brick, warmly held and a long view of the horizon, tender with patience and grace. There's some other kind of love who sets the table. Don't come in this house and not speak. This cheek don't even feel right kissless. Demand a collective consideration. Do bars on the window make you feel more or less safe? When the sun is doing a perfect shimmy, look to love this naked neck. Let us come back. When we go, let us come back. If we can agree, beloved, on the shape of our home, the color of brick, the general location and look warmly held in a long view of the horizon, how we will treat each other within it, tender with patience and grace, then we must be family or some other kind of love. Let's decide together who sets the table, how we say hello. Don't come in this house and not speak, how we take our leave. This cheek don't feel right kissless. Let's be loyal to courageous love. Demand a collective consideration for and with grace. Do bars on the window make you feel more or less safe? Please do not be bothered by singing when the sun is doing a perfect shimmy, shadowed lines scattering the floor. Look to love this naked neck, open and listening to an imperfect tide. Let us come back. When we go, let us come back. Thank you.
Yes.
Wow. Susie Q Smith, wow. I'm honored to be here. My name is Caroline Rothstein. This first poem is called Sex Appeal, and it appears in the current issue. I'm honored to be in company with all of you. Sex Appeal. It isn't that the COVID makes me feel sexy, but I live alone. Even without this isolation, I've lived too long without touch. My hair piled on my head, wisps basking in the glory of my neck, glasses clasped against the bridge of my nose. My red and black flannel long sleeve shirt and pajama shorts from the Gap, heads up for the 6th grade classroom, my labia exposed. I saute veggies, exhausted. No one here to do this work but me. But who else really do I need to tell me what it looks like to stare into my own eyes? My chest does a dance, steam burning in my throat, my torso fatigued, yet erect enough in this kitchen to feel the softness of my curves dangling a carrot from my skin. My body is a temple. How many more times will I have to learn this psalm? In how many different dialects will I yearn the siren song of my sickly serenade before I cease to thrust my anthem in the dust? After I put away the leftovers, clean the stovetop, empty the sink, I take a hot shower, hold the metal bar, lean against the door. I did this once. Prayed to my dead brother and every single god. Tonight, I only have the strength to summon me. In college, my mother often asked when I would write a poem without mentioning my eating disorder. My grandmother asks when I would write a poem about joy. I suppose when the body has been ravaged, consensually or not, every single poem is lust. Thank you. Thank you. This next poem is called Pass. I've experienced an absurd amount of death and grief and loss in my life. We have all experienced an absurd amount of death and grief and loss in our lives, especially the last year, especially all the years before that. And I wrote this poem thinking about all the grief. Thank you all again. This is called Pass. The first time I saw a plant up close was in the tummy-tucked edges of an Oxford, England closet. I was 18. The fluorescent lights hovered close above the leaves. I hadn't smoked yet. It would be another 3 years. I'd been around this stuff since I was 12, 13, always, no thank you, and pass. In the dimly lit flat, 4 men, my best friend Kat, and me. In 4 months, Kat will be dead. I will give a eulogy. It will be my first. I'm not saying grief grows at the same expanse as smoke, but in the midst of this pandemic, we do not talk about the death. Instead, we let it grow underneath the stairs. No one ever sees. If you're lucky, your dead best friend's then boyfriend will take you on a tour, sneak you to the tendrils of the feast, rub your lungs with camphor, where we hold our grief, a lit spliff around the cipher. No thank you, we all say, and pass. Thank you.
Societies wander together like hopeful drops of a virus. citizen testaments bent on offing me a nation of breadwinners to hold me back. Like it's a Brinks, I wrinkle the concrete sometimes like flesh. My Martin Luther King permanence, turning away from a podium into the reeds like God is the dangerous twin. Black August to the mountaintop balcony on my bedroom floor. You know, they steal you from the earth itself and suspend you and your broken neck from their fullest euphoria. From the loyalty oath of their gray superstitions, loyalty oath of their agrarian reform. I return to my mother completely disrespected. For peeling the heat off of purgatory, they killed poets like me. Walk me away from my poems, never to be heard from again in this final industrial complex of bloodlines picked over, picked through with sport and spiritual death, or your devil at least half made. Police become a pretty word. I'm reading a lynch mob shoestrings like they were tea leaves, teaching you how to write about cities. It's the 25th century in the mirror, people. Tyranny against your chump change. You're a chump to be mocked even with a gun in your car. A cubit of needlework spelled tune for the proletariat, the relapse ministry, talented people curled up in a fetal position next to a diamond, dying. Just another service day in the theatrics of tea house fascism and a bouquet of surveillance cameras in the poverty of God. New blue eyes, corpses of water, newly potted presidency, or one big shiny coin if you're asking animated capitalism and other non-literal voids, killing is white freedom, the deification of hyphens, medicine bread and picture shows, great protesters in LA, guests of our ink, drop kicking roses in a graveyard, DC mink like a stone torn in half, the pen advances despite CIA guideposts, despite non-African past and futures, a metaphorical but not surreal day, in a horn-ridden life, horn player, improvising king, like a radio prize fight featuring Shango himself, a real hand sweeps the land of racism. May I return to the ground? May I make progress with the gun? Our mother, Emmanuel, you know, they put on music that evening, a swinging type body language for you to drink with your fermented $5 bills for your body language. Some applause, my past stomach lining, neither a good thing nor a bad thing, like being psychic on the way to a lethal injection. It'll sit you down with Lady Day. Lady Day leading YouTube surrendered their souls to Africa too soon. Polity thought floating in a cup of water. She saved me, accessing my stomach, accessing the love of the American lynched. Coat sleeves wooden and avalanching to the wrist. Our mother Emmanuel avalanching to the sharp keys, pain, the deal you make with pain. You know, piano makes sense for them, laying hands on the world, gradually addressing the bending necks on the streets of the north, travelers sailing in pain, repeating pain in the north, 10 trigger fingers on that piano if harmony would have me, putting 100 fights on every direction, offered her Lady Day, leaning on trees again, recruiting the countryside itself, saying, lay your plan out on this lightning, make your poems the corner pocket of man. You know, I've greeted the blues itself. America may clean my dead body, but will never include me. There goes the poet, killing without killing. Never mind this painting of your language. May I be a meaningful lynching, a crow's passing, good and dead by the afternoon. I'm off to make a church bell out of a bank window. Kitchens meant more to the masses back in the day, and before that we had no enemy. Somewhere in America, the prison bus is running on time. You're gonna lose your job before a revolution hits. Somewhere I won't be home for breakfast. Everyone out here now knows my name and I won't be turned against for at least 4 months. The cop in the picket line is a hardworking rookie. The sign in my hands getting more and more laughs. It says, the picket line got cops in it. I can take care of those windows, but if you want, but someone else got to go inside your gas tank. Was clear to man that rich people had talked too much this year. Hey, why don't you go ahead and throw down that Marble Park bench? Everyone's looking up at, you know, get the fucking Romans out of your mind. Maybe a good night's sleep would have changed the last 20 years of my life playing the instruments like punching the wall. What would you have me do? Replace the population? Give brotherhood back to the winter? Stop smoking cigarettes with the barely dead? You know, they listen in on the Sabbath. Police called the police on me. There was a white candlestick beneath my detention. I ruined the soup again, thought the judge as he took off his pilgrim robe behind the white people's door and more. I didn't get lucky. I got what was coming to me. He told, say, fight me back, the man said, you know, of course, to himself, washing windows with a will to live, tin can on his left shoulder, enjoying the bright, brand new blight with all party goers, both supernatural and supernaturally down to earth. What is this elevator traveling side to side? Like 1,000 bitter Polaroid pictures that you actually try to eat. All the furniture on this street nailed to the cement. Cheap furniture, but we have commitment. This morning, an essay opens the conversation between enemies. Why? Because you control every grain of processed sugar between here and a poor person's border. Because in a tin can on my left shoulder, I can hear the engines of deindustrialization. You should get into painting, you know, tell lies more deeply. This month, I'm rooting for the trader. Carting cement to my pillow here, we will build. I'm high again, not talking much. Hey, why don't you climb up the organ pipe to our apartment floor? I'm high again, calling everything church, singing along to a courtyard, thanks to a horn player's holy past. You know, I'm just putting a real jacket on it. Talk about a real 5 years. Keep memories like these in the pocket next to the toll receipt. That man lost a wager with the God of good causes. I mean, he stood up for himself a little too late, and maybe too early. I can still see 20 angles of his jaw zigzagging through the cold world of deindustrialization. There's an art to it. I will tell my closest friends one day. Thank you.
Woo. All right, Tango. Come on back. Caroline, come on back. Susie, if Susie's still here, I know she had to teach. Just a couple of questions before we go into the next round. All of your poems are amazing, obviously. I mean, you knew that. But I'm wondering, how are you creating in a time of COVID? And after you are creating, how are you replenishing the well? Two-part question.
I'm creating okay, y'all are back in your seats. Okay. I'm creating collectively in some ways. I think I've done more teaching in this past year than ever in life. From the youngest being in the room with me now, the sixth graders up through elders. And part of that is creating collectively as part of a community. Refilling the well is something that I'm gonna listen to everybody else's answer on that, because your girl is a little broke over here when it comes to that, a little dry. So I'll take other people's tips.
Thanks, Susie. Tango, Caroline.
I love that, Susie, about creating collectively. I do feel that very much so. I feel closer to the artists in my life than ever before, because when the pandemic started, I had an existential crisis of like, is making art enough? This is all I want to do with my life. And is it enough when the essential workers on the front lines have a completely different skill set than me? Is making art enough? And I have found that I do think making art is enough, and that is our job. And so it is creating in conversation with the people I love and setting boundaries from the people that try to take my art time away from me, that may not understand what is required for an artist to create. And leaning on folks, some of whom are in this Zoom, to remind me how important it is to set those boundaries, and that making art is enough. And so to replenish, I have read over, 70, 75 romantic comedy books since the pandemic began.
Excellent.
And I'm doing other things to replenish, but that is keeping me full. I highly recommend picking a genre that helps you feel joy. And that's been it for me.
Love it. Put some of your favorite titles in the chat so I can go look it up. Tango, what say you, friend?
Well, I kind of got lucky in that I stumbled into a new approach, not like a new approach, but a fairly new approach to writing that kind of employed more meditative or meditation techniques. So it went right with this little hermitage. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And on the flip, doesn't actually kind of require me to operate from the more conspiratorial parts of my mind. So it's like I'm just poking around. I haven't really run out because I don't know all what this little zone can do yet. So I got lucky to kind of, you get to a new kind of planet or species of poem or approach to writing, Then he just started running experiments. So I just, the timing, I slid. You know?
Right. It was all aligned. It was all aligned. Thank you,
That's
Tongo.
yeah,
Thank
at
you,
least one thing.
Caroline.
Right.
Thank you, Susie. We are going to move into our second round of poets. You will hear from the poets in the order in which I read their bios. Camryn Bruno is the former NYCU Poet Laureate, current ambassador for spoken word and performance poetry in New York City and Trinidad and Tobago. Cathy Lynn is the author of Split, winner of the Kundiman Poetry Prize, the Norma Farber First Book Award from the Poetry Society of America, and the Best Poetry Book Award from the Association of Asian American Studies. She currently serves as executive director at Kundiman and lives in New York City. And finally, Dr. Adam Faulkner is a poet, educator, and equity and inclusion strategist. He's the author of the Willies, Adoption, which was the winner of the Diode Editions Chapbook Award, and his work has been featured on programming for HBO, in The Guardian, The New York Times, and elsewhere. He has toured the US as a guest artist, lecturer, and trainer, and was the featured performer at President Obama's Grassroots Ball at the 2009 Presidential Inauguration. He's a founding partner of the diversity consulting group Dialogue Arts Project and holds over a decade of cross-industry experience developing creative diversity curricula and cultural programming for corporate, academic, and nonprofit partners. Please welcome to the virtual stage our poets.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Camryn Bruno, and I'm in Queens, currently in New York City. The first poem is very near and dear to my heart. I would like to perform it today just in thoughts of Ma'Khia Bryant, in the idea of my matriarchal lineage, kind of figuring out what belongs to me, what I can hold space for, and the resources that help me feel free. So the name of this poem is called Things I Could Never Tell the Sea. Things I could never tell the sea. It's hard to wash away sins from the waters our ancestors tried to walk on. Taught me that I could only stay alive if I keep my head up when being so submerged in you. Waiting. I'm sorry about that. I think it kicked off, so I'm just gonna restart again. Things I could never tell the sea. It's hard to wash away sins from the waters our ancestors tried to walk on. Taught me that I could only stay alive if I keep my head up when being so submerged in you. Waiting, because this Sarah Batman body drags me underwater when I do nothing. But Yamaha would never allow the sea to swallow our kind whole again. Her name, which means mothers whose children are the fish, you knew big fish couldn't live in tiny ponds. You watched me stifle, knew water had oxygen in it, knew underwater is where Blacks learn to breathe. To know water means struggle, to be twins, both bodies of water. Why my sweat and tears are salted, never question why the sea is so salty. Didn't you know this Black is cleansed? I don't get seasick when the sea cradles me to sleep. On the spines of men, no book seems to bind or account for. Funny how the water always brings things back to us. You are the body that holds all of my troubles, better than my mother could. My mother's mother's mother held you like if it was a rite of passage. And once my mother told me to never turn my back against the sea. In front of me is current and it's only the waves that would get me there. But how can you turn your back against the thing that brought you here? So here I am. My mother's 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 reincarnation. I can't imagine living in a space that has less room than the dead. Seems to be a little bit selfish. I can imagine the captain confusing the spirit of his men with the spirit in his cup, both deadly, his cockpit a bridge, and plenty of water ran under bridges because us Black knew better, to know death better than bondage, to be free, to be twins, to know these bodies belong to nobody, so we will have a funerary baptism, an open casket for the fishes, a body as a bloody host for a shark's communion, encapsulating dense bones of my ancestors in Davy Jones's locker. I was a middle passage between dirt and a foreign land, between land and a foreign land. The waters between continents became a second home to me. I am the immigrant, permanent like the riptide. We teach our children to use water as leisure, but teach them to wash away pain in the solvent that got us out of it. And that is why I learned how to wade first. And it is said, just as the ocean gave birth to Black people and delivered us into a new land, some seek salvation here. For the rest of us, finding escape was enough. Thank you. And the second poem that I'm going to do is an interesting one. It's called Spontaneous Combustion. When buildings are built on the ashes of failures, institutions that are grown on infertile soil, the heap of tinder would only grow bigger. Buildings built with the rage of gas-filled bricks hands that belong to the construction worker are to blame. But who put the bricks there in the first place? When cities are born on land and they not know who came before is like rubbing oil on skin. Grease of industrialization breathing in the coal used to fire it. Know that fire and gunpowder can't live together. Know that fire is only dangerous if you can't control it. You gentrify ashes, make them look pretty, but ashes know to turn back to what they once were before. Sparks of light in one place can turn an entire thing into inferno. And it takes only one match to watch the city burn. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Cathy Che, and I'm going to share 2 poems today. And this one's in the Brooklyn Rail. Thinking about touch. Mahogany's prompt was to think about touch and other things during this pandemic. Fade in. In those blue years, I lived among the pines. I watched a man sink his face into a flower patch. I kissed my right hand and buried my left. Outside, the snow tumbled fat and wet. I was sad when you arrived, hungover, and asking me out for a drink. You called me beautiful, and I could see that you meant it. I looked into the long nothing of my day. The river carried leaves under us. Another man's panic undid me. I waited for him to pause so I could speak. At the root of the mountain, I lost my glow. Today's weather reads smoke. Friends ask questions and I don't know what to say. I hold on to the body of a man who doesn't always know me. Sometimes we are like children who marvel at the stench our bodies can make. And this is a second poem. So my parents were, I'm Vietnamese American, and my parents were hired as extras in Apocalypse Now when they were in a refugee camp. And so part of the project is to think up through that. And so I'm just gonna read this short poem. The self who I am today and the self who I am tomorrow will end. The dual selves duel or jump one another in a fight. I kissed the egregious foes and discovered verily they were me. I don't believe in birdsong as healing. Birds are their own witnesses. The farmland spun fresh soil. My mother digs the trap of time. In this version, Coppola scraps the whole idea of Heart of Darkness entirely and gives his millions to the refugees and says here, you tell your own story. Version 2, I return to my father's house and pillage his home videos for my own use. They and I will never be forgotten. Script 3, my father becomes a famous home video director. He writes his autobiography, rather than the spoiled daughter who insists on representing his life. Thank you.
Thank you, Cathy. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mahogany, for continuing to curate rooms that are richer because you do so. And thank you, Brooklyn Rail. Excited to be here with y'all. Similarly, I think reflecting on this question of touch, as Cathy offered, I'm going to read the piece that was in the Brooklyn Rail first. And I'm coming to you live from a Waffle House parking lot / truck stop, which, you know, no explanation needed. So what if I'm not ready to leave yet? I like it in the house where it's warm, where my dog's paws smell of hot sleep and corn chips, and every day is sad, but it's the same. So what if I like the way we check on each other now, even if the forecast doesn't change? Boxed light and ticker tape, a stiff gin to remind the day to turn. I used to be bummed by all there was to want and how little time we got in the life of a day to go get it. How every day was just a refresh, menu of metrics to measure my worth with, better light in an apartment, a better job, boyfriend, my friends love louder, a happier way to have your cake and eat it. But listen, now the life that could have been doesn't even make sense. I don't secretly want to be a pop star or a famous professor or a senator or whatever, depending on the day my whiteness makes me think I can have. I'm working on it. But let's just say for now, I crave less. I starve for little more than the dust of a beloved's single dangling earring against stubble, mid-hug in a doorway on a street corner. The wheeze and wet air of laughter in a corner booth, palms pounding the table in good story. A single slung arm around a neck. This is the 354th straight day I have closed my eyes and imagined this world. We do not return to the plod of hard start times and efficient email follow-ups. The thirst for some almighty better fades like footprints in a rainstorm. I call the beloveds nightly. I am in love with all things suddenly small and tender, flung wide open at the hinge and raw, a wire scraped so far open, I could scream. The second piece I'll read is I think in line with a similar quest, right, toward trying to find intimacy in this like broken and fragile and strange moment. And I've started writing a lot lately about just the reliance on technology, right, which is both a comfort and a horror to find a kind of intimacy that, you know, like our lifeblood depends on. So I'm going to read this one brand new poem that has never been read aloud. So what's up, Broken Around? The Anonymous. The Anonymous has been following me for quite some time. He knows all there is to know. The Anonymous says, I'd be astonished at what you can learn from someone's search history. I have great taste in shoes, for example. Smart book choices. They even admire what I do for a living, which though they do not specify, I know they know because they are on a roll. The Anonymous also tells me I'd be astonished at what you can learn through someone's computer camera. My porn choices, for example. How often I masturbate. The position that gets me to come the hardest. And suddenly I have 48 hours or else. All of my contacts will be sent this reckless mess of me. Scrawny hips pressed against what I imagine could be one of a handful of bathroom sinks, groaning in full mouth and sour patch pucker, a single palm planted into a mirror, and I must admit, while I do not wish for my friends and family such a crude workday interruption, I do not mind altogether this image of me. None of us particularly love ourselves until we are forced to. What shame have you clawed your whole life to set down? I mean, what tank have you gasped out of to make it to this very poem? I do not mind accepting the invitation to walk closer toward myself as consumable good, to be wildly unprecious palms to beasts nasty, splayed as memeable putty, with nothing more to show except it all. Love y'all. Thank you.
Yes.
Woo-hoo. What shame have you clawed your whole life to set down? Yes, Cathy. Cathy has exceptional chat skills. I just want to go ahead and point that out. At one point you said poets are essential workers, and I grasped my chest because the realest of all time. Please come back, Cathy and Adam and Camryn, for a quick Q&A about your brilliance. Two-part question again. What does community look like now for you? And how have you learned to show up so that you can be a part of that community, but also keep yourself safe?
I can go. I would most definitely say before the pandemic, community wasn't a word that was in my vocabulary as often. You know, you have friendships and relationships, but there wasn't this idea of community building. And just about June of last year is when I really started to understand what community would look like for me and what it should look like. And that meant that I had to step up in different ways and also step down in different ways. And also understanding what activism can and will look like in the sense of poetry and arts and providing healing. So I most definitely took a more healing aspect to all of my community building and sort of providing a safe space for anyone to express themselves the way that they can, and also providing this idea of what poetry can look like and centering joy around that.
Thank you, Camryn.
Thank you.
Cathy, Adam?
For me, I guess, because my job is in some ways to take care of a community of Asian American writers, I think the pandemic has really taught me a lot about self-care. So I have a 12-point self-care checklist. I mean, I've edited since then because you can't self-care all day, right? But I've, you know, like, I've just learned how to take care of myself, because you can't take care. I mean, everybody knows this, but I can't take care of anybody else if I'm just feeling totally wiped out, and also just being very forgiving of myself too. So, and it translates when somebody else is going through it. You know, if you're kind to yourself, then you can be kind to your community and really hold them. So I think that's part of it. And I have my community keeps me accountable to my writing practice, and you know, showing up to spaces like this is amazing because you have all this, you know, Camryn with, you know, talking about like the imagination in so many ways, and Adam, you know, writing this poem that I feel like is a reclamation of like one's like body. And you know, I'm just like trying to write, you know, some horny poems during the pandemic, TBH. So yeah. The horniest.
Totally. Honestly, the world needs more horny poems.
Immediately.
Way more horny poems.
And Faulkner, what say you?
Yeah, I mean, I really resonate with both Camryn and Cathy's articulations of what this last year has meant in terms of community. Certainly for me, it's meant checking in much more aggressively with how I am all the time. And part of that has meant like being outside and filling my lungs up with like fresh air, preferably not in a Waffle House parking lot, you know, but the other kind of fresh air. I've also, I think, really been forced to extend more trust to the virtual sense of community, which I think for me, I've always kind of kept at an arm's distance because, you know, Zoom and FaceTime served a very work-oriented sort of consulting and educator-based need, right? That's the box it ticked. And then I think the reality that like that was the tool we needed to kind of come together has allowed me to extend much more grace to how we show up in virtual spaces, and including all of the like unprecious, unpolished ways that we do so. It's also, you know, made me double down on bonds that I want to be, you know, sitting in a rocking chair with like 50 years from now, right? Sipping something strong and dark. Those are the people that I take daily account of and think how they're doing and how am I doing and am I okay enough to be able to show up for them in the ways that I hold myself accountable for.
I love it. Thank you all so much for giving us the poems, and I'm ready for this 12-step self-care to-do sheet. We will Venmo you for your for your template sharing, Cathy. I'm going to close by reading a little bit of what I wrote, if that's okay. I mean, you could say it's not okay. I'm still reading.
Yes, you got to do it.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. I'm not reading from the top. I want to read from here because I started writing this 8 months into the pandemic. And then, of course, I sat on it for a while. And when I received the invitation, I thought the only place it makes sense going is the Brooklyn Rail, which is an amazing space that always offers an opportunity to dig a bit deeper, to think outside of the genre, to think outside of the page, to think outside of the fear. So today, 8 months into this quarantine life, I close my eyes and allow my hands to linger on the cutting board. I am preparing dinner, something I am still not good at, but my hands clean the seafood. I touch the knives and the steel is not welcoming. Instruments are a means to an end. The flesh is infinite. Its propensity to touch and be touched, the heat of consent, the balm and healing properties of a body beaconing safety. I am afraid of who I will become without the kindness of human touch. Sometimes on my Twitter feed, someone on my Twitter feed jokes that quarantine is like prison, and I close my eyes. My hunger can lead me to a kitchen. My skin has access to showers whenever I choose. This is not close to mass incarceration, and still it is haunting. The absence of a heartbeat orbiting my own. The light bursts of us sharing the fraction of time, breathing the same air, breathing in our own becoming. Since March 2020, I have only felt the hugs and hands of family members. I miss hugging my girlfriends, the lavish brunches once shared, dishes of sweet syrup and honey blossoms passed from hand to hand. We rely on fuzzy text messages now. We try not to fill too much space up with the grief. A cousin dies. As I write this, it has been 340 days since Breonna Taylor's body lay dying on the ground. It's been 340 days as I write this essay, as I hashtag say her name, and still no one has been charged for the crime of her murder. The pain of this injustice feels like a stone in my shoe. It is the only thing that can touch me without emptying my fear reserve. The internet fills up my haunts. The social media platform pulls my blood closer to the protest line. The news feed pretends we are angry at being COVID-stricken. The culminating injustice pulls at the neatness of my survival as the images of so many grieving, dying, and gone fill my screen. Elders and children are pepper sprayed on the way to the voting booth. Elders and children are pepper sprayed during protest. Face masks only cover their nose and mouth. Their eyes are a sea of sad milk. Their hands defying mountains, erecting new skylines amidst the soot. They march and weep openly. My hands ring themselves a new coat of failure. I am afraid to touch. I am afraid of touch. The Trump administration has shown me what it is capable of doing to bodies like mine. This government has proved my life is not worth saving, even if they are the culprit obstructing the ease of this bittersweet life. I miss touching. Breonna Taylor was made an example. I miss hugging. Eleanor Bumpurs was made an example. 500,000 and rising have died from COVID-19. Alteria Woods was made an example. I miss the way arms tangle with one another when walking together down a sidewalk or through a park path. Rekia Boyd was made an example. I almost cry when I begin to dream of dinners with friends and shared plates of joy. Sandra Bland was made an example. I clean my hands when I touch the door, after I open a package, and after I pass a 20 to the food delivery person. The day I vote, I move in front of a computer screen instructing me to submit my ballot. The plexiglass is smudged with my sweat, even though my hands are covered cold and trembling. Thank y'all so much. Be good to yourselves, be good to each other. I love y'all very much. And I am officially fully vaccinated, double shot, pow, pow. So as soon as I see you, I'm hugging, especially you, Fong. Thank you for that beautiful portrait. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Malvika. Thank you, Brooklyn Braille. Does anyone want to come and say what we got to get ready for? Because we have another one of these, right? This is like the 34th of a thing.
Yeah.
Hi, Angie.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mahogany, for that beautiful reading, for your beautiful curation, and for bringing us all together and keeping us in questions and conversation and in love. Thank you, Cathy. Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Camryn. We're so excited to follow your beautiful future. Thank you, Susie Q, especially with the 6th grade classroom during lunch hour. And Adam, thank you for joining us from the Waffle House. Tongo, and of course, to all of you who tuned in together in the audience and in the chat. If you enjoyed today's program, please check out the April Guest Critics page, lovingly curated by Mahogany L. Browne. I'll drop some links in the chat right now. I'm also dropping a link to a fundraiser for Ma'Khia Bryant's family as they seek justice. Hit it up if you can. We're celebrating the Rail's 20th anniversary this year, so as a nonprofit, if you enjoyed today's program, please consider making a donation to keeping the Rail and our special projects free, relevant, and independent. And please join us again tomorrow for Age of No Consequences, Zoom and White Supremacy with Hongzheng Han, when scholars and cybersecurity experts Engben Lim, John Chen, and William Beer join curator Hongzheng Han for a panel discussing the rise in anti-Asian violence and cybersecurity risks in the age of Zoom. Ironically, we're having it on Zoom. We'll close that with a poetry reading from Enshi Chang, and this will be a special late night NSE. We'll be meeting at 7 p.m. Eastern right here in the Zoom. Hope you can come out, and this has been so beautiful. Thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Mahogany. You should now be able to turn on your microphones and say goodbye on your way out, but this has been absolutely incredible. What a treat.
Bye, everyone. Thank you
so much, Mahogany.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thanks,
Incredible.
Thanks, Caroline. Thanks, Cathy. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you so much, Adam.
Thank you, Tongo.
Thank you guys. That was a beautiful reading. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Hi, Cathy. Thank you. Hi, Norma.
Hi.
Hi, Norma. Hello. Good to
Hey,
see
Amma.
you.
Hey, Nick.
Good to see you.
Hi.
Hi.
Good to see you all.